Yeah.
and it looks just exactly like it.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? I had
Yeah,
no idea.
yeah. Nobody seems to.
Well,
It's interesting.
that's why you're there, Olaf, doing all that
Right.
research there all these years.
Yeah, yeah. That's
So,
Walter. Walter did a great job on that.
oh, and people can find that information where, do you suppose?
Amazon.com. You can just put in Paranoia Magazine. I believe it's issue 65. And yeah, you can read his article about it.
Oh, that's wonderful. So we can get Paranoia Magazine on Amazon then. That's a great place to find it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, did you happen to have some kind of a sighting when you were younger, or some kind of an interest or an incident maybe that piqued your interest when you were young, or did you just kind of always be in this kind of vein?
No, I had a sighting when I was about 7 or 8. Probably about 8. I was laying in bed a little too late. I'm reading a Choose Your Own Adventure. I'm a product of the late 80s. And actually, it was the mid 80s at that point. And I looked up from my book, and there was a massive white light outside my window on the second floor. And I looked at it, and I didn't know what it was. And being a child, I got back into my book. I'm like, no, it's going to go away. And it didn't. And then I hid under my comforter, and then it didn't go away, and it didn't go away, and it didn't go away. So finally I worked up the courage, and I sprinted across my room, and then I crossed the hall into my parents' room, and my dad, the minute I opened the door, my dad was awake. And I said, Dad, Grandpa was in the Air Force, you were in the Air Force. You know a lot about planes. He wasn't a pilot, but, if you're in the Air Force, right, you're always about, the planes are everywhere.
Yeah.
And I said, I need you to tell me. And, I grew up on an Air Force base, a couple of them. And, I know planes. I'm like, I don't know what this thing is. You got to come and look at it. So my dad had been in law enforcement in the Air Force. And he had a Air Force issued billy club, nightstick. And so he grabs the nightstick and he says, get behind me. And I'm behind him. And we go across the hallway and go into my room. And he's ready, and it's gone.
Oh, so, man.
Yeah, so he puts me back to bed, and he's like, don't worry, I'm here. Nothing's going to happen. And I actually asked him recently, because, I'm 43, so, I asked him recently, I said, hey, Dad, do you believe me? He goes, oh, I know you were telling the truth. He said, I absolutely believe what you said. So anyway, the next morning, that's good confirmation for me, right? The next morning, luckily it was library day at my elementary school. And so I went to the librarian, and when you're in elementary school, the librarian is not so much a librarian. They're more like a librarian and a teacher, because they're teaching you library science, and kind of like a guide, right? And so I went to the librarian, and I said, hey, I saw something weird outside my window. I want to know what it was. And she said, oh, you want the airplane books? That's Dewey Decimal, whatever. I don't remember. And I'm like, no. I said, I know airplanes. This was not an airplane. And she goes, oh, you want those books? And I'm like, yes, whatever those books are, that's what I want. So instead of giving me the Dewey Decimal System, she actually pointed at it. And I can still tell you where they are. And they were on the bottom shelf at the end of a bookshelf. And so I go over there, and I got 3 books. I got Messengers of Deception by Jacques Vallée. I got Mysteries of Time and Space by Brad Steiger. And I got the one by Hynek.
Oh, my gosh. If you had to pick 3 books to start with, those would have been historic. That's great.
Tell me about it. So I took them home, and I tried to read Vallée, and Messengers of Deception gets into a lot of arcane stuff, because he's talking about the genesis of things and how they changed over time, and like medieval representations of things. And, I can understand it, but it was just a bit dry for me at 8.
Yeah.
And so I tried Hynek. Hynek was too dense. because he writes scholarly, and I couldn't digest it as I'm 8. And so then I read Mysteries of Time and Space, and I was hooked. I did not find the answer to what I saw. I've never found the answer, but brother Brad, rest in peace, great guy. I had many conversations with him about this, but Brad Steiger's book Mysteries of Time and Space really launched me, because that book covers everything. I mean, there's like time portals and ghosts and all different kinds of stuff, and it blew my mind that at 8 years old that these kinds of time effects can happen, and these weird things are happening, and I'm like, it kind of blew my mind. So that's how it started, and then it's just been a slow crawl after that.
Well, what a legacy to be able to say that Brad Steiger started you on this paranormal road here. He's quite a prolific author. I don't know how many hundreds of books he has actually written, in the Fortean kind of vein, but he's an awesome researcher and writer.
He was, and he was a genuinely amazing human being. And him and Sherry were just the nicest people ever.
Well, I think there's got to be a story in there. How the heck did you were able to hook up to talk with Brad and his wife Sherry at all?
I forget how it happened, but we just became acquainted with each other. I forget if it was through Ground Zero or what, but we just became acquainted with each other, and oddly, I told him the story that I just told you, and he was really touched by it. And actually, he put a very condensed version of it into when they re-released Mysteries of Time and Space. So the story is actually in the intro, and I was just like shocked and amazed and so happy and honored. And
isn't that great? That's
guy.
Wonderful.
Oh yeah, beautiful people.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So, and you mentioned your radio show down there, and tell us a little bit about that and that era of your life as well.
Well, I used to be the executive producer of Ground Zero Radio with Clyde Lewis. Sorry, I have a bit of a frog in my throat. Yeah, I mean, I used to book guests and help with the show and do all that kind of stuff, and then later I had to pass the reins on. It's now the executive producer is Ron Patton, who's actually the editor-in-chief and also a writer of Paranoia. So I kind of handed it off to him, and he's been running with it since and doing a fantastic job. And we actually have a podcast, me and Ron.
Oh, wonderful. That'd be interesting. How can people catch that one?
You can get to it from paranoiamagazine.com. It's on SoundCloud.
Okay.
It's called the Paranoia Podcast. That's difficult to remember, right?
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, easy to remember.
Yeah.
So tell us how it is to work with the legendary Clyde Lewis.
It's amazing. Clyde's a great guy. He puts on a great show. And, when you're working day to day, I did that for almost 2 years, I think. But when you're maybe a year and a half, but when you're working in that environment, people are constantly sending you weird stuff. And one of the things that I used to do to help Clyde is I'd investigate some of it. So, people from all over who listen to the show, they'll send you their stories or documents or whatever. And it's like a treasure trove.
Yeah, so you were there to kind of research and back up some of the stories to see if they're true and if they led to something. What an amazing position to be in on a major paranormal radio show, being able to follow up on all the strange, anomalous activity that people are reporting. I often count my blessings myself for being Peter Davenport's attorney for the last 24 years and being able to hear some of the inside scoop on some of the reports that he gets. But I can't imagine being in a paranormal radio show, the status of Clyde Lewis's at Ground Zero, and be able to kind of like pick and choose, cherry pick the good stuff and go after it.
Well, it actually started out that way. When I was still in college, I had gone on Ground Zero when it was still in Utah. And Clyde had emailed me and asked me if I would come on the show. And I said, sure, because, I was a UFO researcher, and I kind of did the show. And then after that, there was an event that happened in the Bay Area where I live. And he sent it to me. He's like, can you figure this out? And so I went and figured it out. And then, that led to more. And, that was quite an insane journey of figuring that one out. But again, he called me up, and that was really the genesis. That investigation was the genesis of a relationship that's lasted quite some time with him, probably close to 20 years now.
Yeah. And I'll bet that Clyde got to interview Brad Steiger himself, and maybe that's how you hooked up with the guy at one point.
Yeah. We tried to get a lot of the luminaries on the show so they could talk about stuff.
Yeah.
We always went for the top. So, yeah.
Well, and I just love Clyde's voice and his demeanor, his way of interviewing. He's just a real classic DJ from the old days, but can really get into the paranormal. I just love the way he does his show.
Well, and also, one of the nice things about him is that he's had a lot of experiences himself. And also, like me, I've had a lot of experiences, and it changes the way you do the show. If you haven't really had that many experiences, with 14 and stuff, then if you're trying to do a radio show about it, it's a little difficult. If you've never seen a UFO, it makes it harder to interview somebody about them.
Yes. No, exactly. And I remember when Clyde went down to the ECETI Ranch, James Gilliland's ECETI Ranch, and were you there too? I was going to ask you, what did you think of that investigation, that field trip that you guys made down there?
The ECETI Ranch is insane.
Yeah.
And, not only did I see black budget aircraft, I'm fairly certain they were black budget aircraft. Not only did I see black aircraft, I saw things that I can't explain happen on that mountain. I watched a hangar door open on the side of it. I was sitting playing Tetris, because I'm a Tetris guy. I was sitting playing Tetris during the day, because there's not a whole lot to do there during the day.
Yeah.
And my friend was elbowing me, and you got to see this. And I'm like, no, I'm playing Tetris. He says, no, you got to see this. And we watched what I believe are two Bigfoot, Sasquatch, climb up the side of Mount Adams for probably over an hour.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so you...
Did you happen to have any lenses on them at all?
The only thing I had at that very moment was first of all, one of the things you have to explain, all I had was my iPhone, and it didn't really work.
Yeah.
But one of the things that a lot of people who haven't had experiences, whether they're ghosts or UFOs, I mean, I've had them all, but whether they're ghosts, UFOs, Sasquatch, whatever, one of the things that people don't know is that when that happens, that you think to yourself, well, I've got, I had a nice Nikon camera that I probably could have gotten something with, but you're so awestruck in the moment, and your mind is so blown that you're not thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to go grab a camera and I'm going to figure this stuff out. You're just consumed by the moment.
Yeah.
I mean,
and of course, you hear all the stories about people going to get their cameras. When they come back, it's gone.
It's gone.
You don't want to miss a thing.
You don't want. Right. I was once part of a mass UFO sighting in the city of Dixon. My co-parent and I, we were in college at the time. She was my girlfriend then. But we had gotten the guy who was our handyman in our apartment complex. He was a bit of a UFO nut, and there was a big sighting the night before. And he had cut out the news article and given it to me. And we looked at each other and we were like, well, let's go out there. Nothing will happen. So we go out into the cornfield and we're watching, and we watched probably 14 different objects basically have a dogfight in midair for about an hour. And then we watched them peel off, and they were running lines between two radio masts. and eventually one of them started coming